Hi everyone, Kat here. I am so excited to dive into the second part of Holly Berry's Beast-Yeast story, and is that Shadow Milk on the opening screen of Eternal Sugar's update? Okay, yeah, it's no secret that I'm a Shadow Milk fan. My last video was about him body swapping with Pure Vanilla. And I know, lots of fans are sick of him. I get why. But even if you're a hater, I do think it made sense to put him in here because his story is pretty much a mirror of Eternal Sugar's. And authors note, this is a good thing. Weaving patterns and motifs into a series while keeping the individual stories unique takes a lot of skill, and the writers nailed it here. Both Beast cookies feel incomplete and lonely until their respective ancient shows up. And both of them ruin any chance for companionship with that ancient because they just can't let go of being in control, of being right. But let's back up a bit to what happened before any of the ancients confronted their beasts. Spoiler warnings. Unlike the first two beasts we saw, Eternal Sugar and Shadow Milk both have their own spaces isolated from the rest of reality. These aren't normal locations. Eternal Sugar has the Garden of Delights, which regular cookies can only enter or leave if she lets them. Shadow Milk has the Dark Side of the Moon, a kind of pocket dimension and the source of his magic, along with the Spire of All Knowledge, which he suggests has some physical connection to him, calling it the belly of the beast when Pure Vanilla arrives. Both cookies also isolate themselves from the other beasts in some way. Eternal Sugar rarely goes outside her garden, despite her beast interactions suggesting she more or less gets along with all of them. Well, all except Shadow Milk, but his interactions suggest everyone else finds him a nuisance. Interestingly enough, when Shadow Milk shows up in the garden, Eternal Sugar doesn't actually chase him out, just warns him to behave while he's there. So why was he there anyway? Well, part of it is somehow related to Pure Vanilla. The Lady in Azure talks about gathering berries of the heart for a student. Shadow Milk has called Pure Vanilla his student before, and he's aware that Pure Vanilla was an actual student at the school he founded. But while he's there, he also warns Eternal Sugar about the path she's on, because he sees it playing out for her exactly the same way it played out for him. Horribly. It's not clear how fully aware he is of their similarities, but from a reader's perspective, both of their stories have 5 major plot points that mirror each other perfectly. Point 1 is when the ancients enter. Both Holly Berry's story and Pure Vanilla's story involve an ancient voluntarily entering the beast's lair because they need something from it. Holly Berry is initially pulled into the garden against her will, but ultimately she re-enters of her own volition to seek healing for the injured Wildberry cookie. Pure Vanilla comes to the Spire of All Knowledge seeking magic that can reseal the beasts again. Holly Berry does find what she's seeking, though it gets her deeply entangled with Eternal Sugar, while Pure Vanilla is ultimately unsuccessful, and it's questionable at the end whether such a spell existed to begin with. The key is that both beasts are aware of what the ancient is looking for, and use this as a way to lure them in, hoping to trap them in their domains permanently. Point 2 is the weakened soul gems. When both Eternal Sugar and Shadow Milk confront their respective ancients, one of the first things they notice is how fragile their opponent's soul gem is. On seeing Pure Vanilla, Shadow Milk comments, "This soul gem is not how I remember it. Tarnished and unstable, ready to shatter at any moment. Truth these days." And on Eternal Sugar's side, she says this of Holly Berry, "Passion is so fragile. It only takes one touch for it to crumble." Both beasts take the states of the other soul gem to mean that their opponent is within inches of defeat already, and they aren't entirely wrong in thinking this. By the time we get to the end of each story, we'll see both Pure Vanilla and Holly Berry driven to a dark place mentally, pretty much ready to give up. In fact, in both cases, it's only through the intervention of a trio of friends that each ancient is able to rekindle their beliefs and push themselves forward. But how do the beasts drive them to this state? Well, it's mostly through a series of distorted visions and just plain rubbing the worst moments of their lives back in their faces. Which brings us to point 3, memories and visions. We already saw in Beast-Yeast 9 how Eternal Sugar replays some of the most difficult memories of Holly Berry's life for her. The former queen sees herself pushing royal duties onto her young son far too early simply because she doesn't want to deal with them. She sees herself leaving the kingdom so she can have a responsibility-free life as an adventurer. And she sees the consequences of that when her family and kingdom are torn apart by dragon attacks. Eternal Sugar takes this a step further in Beast-Yeast 10. When Holly Berry has the means to leave through the Berry of All Pains, Eternal Sugar shows her a series of likely false futures that she's concocted, of the other 4 beasts triumphing, of families losing loved ones. All because Holly Berry made her subjects leave Eternal Sugar's paradise. The message Eternal Sugar wants to drill into her is, passion gets you nothing, so embrace sloth instead. Shadowmilk takes a similar approach. Rather than distorted visions of the future, he shows pure vanilla altered versions of the past, with truth backfiring in some way. Pure Vanilla sees himself being unwelcome at the council with Clotted Cream due to his connection with White Lily and everyone knowing the truth about her being Dark Enchantress. He sees his attempts to soften messages twisted into lies of omission, and when he's asked a series of pointed questions about his past actions, he attempts to lie by saying he'd do things differently, even though he knows he wouldn't. And what's Shadowmilk's point here? Truth gets you nothing, so embrace deceit instead. Our 4th plot point is an Underlings Betrayal, or more specifically, a fairy-ish Underlings Betrayal. Both beasts' behaviors get increasingly erratic as they fixate more and more on winning their counterparts over. Eternal Sugar Cookie stops paying attention to the other cookies in her garden, and isolates herself in the garden's heart with Holly Berry. When she's forced to leave to deal with Shadowmilk, she puts Pavlova in charge of guarding Holly Berry, and he leaves her other underling Sugarfly Cookie alone to defend against Holly Berry's entourage. Sugarfly is not very confrontational and tries to understand why the others don't want Eternal Sugar Cookie's kind gifts. We then learn that her wings have been encased in hardened syrup, not only making it impossible for her to fly, but also giving her this creepy, undying loyalty to the beast cookies she serves. Oh. Okay, just look at Candy Apple Cookie for a second here. We see a friendly version of her in the Apple Fairy Cookie disguise, and then we see her apples coated in syrup, and she has that same creepy, obsessive loyalty. Anytime the game mentions Shadowmilk made her, it's phrased in a way that suggests she's lying or misinformed. Just saying, if it comes out later that Apple Fairy Cookie was a real cookie that Shadowmilk syrup dunked so he could have another minion, I will not be surprised. But whatever her origin, Candy Apple has the same reaction to Shadowmilk's strange behaviors that Sugarfly does to Eternal Sugars. When he starts doing weird stuff like giving second and third chances even when Pure Vanilla breaks his game rules, Candy Apple decides to take some initiative by releasing Gingerbrave and friends so Shadowmilk will blame Pure Vanilla and supposedly come to his senses. Sugarfly likewise tries to defend Eternal Sugar Cookie's honor in a battle with Holly Berry, but ultimately she realizes her coated wings make her a poor fighter, and even though it's painful, she breaks them free, shattering the spell on her mind in the process. Both Candy Apple and Sugarfly's rebellions, however, are quickly discovered and punished by the beasts. Sugarfly is trapped in a jam jar, while Candy Apple is trapped in a tarot card. And so we come to our last point, rejected friendship. The final arc of each beast's story is the most tragic. Both of them become convinced that their other half has been won over by sloth or deceit, and they are ecstatic. They may have been content to exercise their corrupted virtues on a smaller, isolated group of cookies before. Now they have their sights on all cookies falling to deceit or sloth. In fact, Shadowmilk thinks that he and Pure Vanilla can take on the witches themselves. You get this sense of completeness they finally feel, which falls right in line with what we know of their past. They lived for a long time with both halves of the Soul Jam together as one. Pure Vanilla says that Shadowmilk sees the Ancients all as half cookies, but it's not a stretch to assume that Shadowmilk and Eternal Sugar also feel that way about themselves. Eternal Sugar literally calls Hollyberry her other half. The ancients are a missing part of themselves personified. It's no wonder they want to be with them so badly. But the tragic part of their stories is this: there's zero room for the other's feelings or views in these supposed relationships they've built. They're just so convinced that they're right that Pure Vanilla or Hollyberry doing a 180 on everything they've ever believed in makes total sense to them. Of course you'd stay here forever. It's great here. Of course you'd want to spread deceit far and wide. Who wouldn't? Their diluted versions of what a partnership looks like gives each ancient the perfect opening to escape from them. Hollyberry eats the berry of all pains that Eternal Sugar was so sure she'd never take. Pure Vanilla steals control of Shadowmilk's other realm away from him. Both the garden and the spire ultimately are destroyed because the beast in charge of them took an ancient's compliance for affection. When the dust settles, both beasts are offered a chance at a healthy relationship, and they both reject it, just outright. Shadowmilk threatens to wipe Pure Vanilla off the face of Earthbread for suggesting it, and Eternal Sugar just straight up ignores it because she's deluded herself into thinking that if she just rebuilds her garden, Hollyberry will come back and do whatever she wants. Now, did Shadowmilk's experience give him some great insight into the path Eternal Sugar was about to walk down? Was this warning made out of genuine concern? Honestly, I doubt it. If anything, I'd assume this was an attempt to set himself up for a nice little "I told you so" later. Misery loves company, and I'm guessing that's especially true for the Beast cookies. But it's interesting to consider if Eternal Sugar had taken the warning seriously, or if Shadowmilk had been warned by a different beast just how badly things would go. Would either of them have acted any differently? I'm not sure they would. The beasts are designed as tragic characters, meaning they're going to be offered a brighter path again and again, and each time, they're going to reject it. Their stories mirror each other because they're making the same types of mistakes that lost them half of their soul gems in the first place. Now, do I think one story pulls off this arc better than the other? Yes and no. I like the complex relationship Shadowmilk has with his original virtue. He doesn't just believe that deceit is right and truth is wrong. He more tries to argue that truth doesn't really exist because knowledge is just a collection of what everyone agrees is true. At some point when he was the fount of knowledge, he realized that cookies didn't care so much about accuracy. They just liked what felt good to them. He's corrupted by the shortcomings of others, whereas Eternal Sugar is corrupted by the harsh reality that life and happiness are fragile. The way she relates to her original virtue is more straightforward, but it also made her story feel tighter to me. There's less of her sitting around making arguments because she makes her point clearly from the start. This gave the story room for a solid subplot with the secondary characters. Gingerbrave and friends are either being victimized or running around lost for most of Beast-Yeast 7 and 8. And also 10 for some reason. Whereas Wildberry and the others have chances to move the plot forward. They even change Sugarfly's mind and convince her to try flying again. And I do love a good redemption arc. I don't think the beasts themselves are getting one anytime soon, though. They're still clinging a little too tight to their current paths. But I do believe we could see them change. Because these are complex characters who grow and evolve. Which is why I like to talk about their stories so much, and write my own stories about them. They are tragic, but that type of character can also be inspiring, especially when it comes to creating our own stories, don't you think? No, really, tell me what you think in the comments. Oh, and that Pure Vanilla Shadowmilk body swap fic I mentioned, that's right here, also has my first request fic in it. I legit need new requests, so if Beast-Yeast 10 fueled your headcanons like it did mine, I'd love to turn those new ideas into cutscenes for you. You can make requests on my Discord, invites are in both videos' descriptions. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy reading and happy cookie training!